And the magic machine tells us that we're live. Do I proceed or do I wait for people to join the live chat? The classic conundrum in this new, call it new, I mean, live streaming, right, as a culture, even that new thing is already coming to be a couple of years old, right? I refer to these things, these methodologies, these technologies as new. But for how long is that term relevant and accurate, given the speed with which internet culture moves? Um, should that extend the duration of when these technologies can graduate from new to obsolete? I don't know. This is going to be one of those. Mark Fisher warning you that we're all have died on the operating table of postmodern 20th century culture, and the 21st century is a nadir of um, irrelevantly abstracted, continually looped nostalgia metaphors and memes, um, pointing to us and reminding us constantly um, that we seem to the perils of immortality, right? In a world where nothing goes away and therefore nothing can be new or rediscovered. Um, there is a certain ennui that I experience, and maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's reactionary. When I do these types of videos, I often get I guess you could say, accusation of being the bitter old man. Get off my lawn, you crazy kids. Um, but it's for the kids that I make this message. It's for the kids that I make this message. Um, it's absolutely unnecessary. It is absolutely unnecessary to ape the musical stylings of the turn of the millennium or the 90s or the 80s or the 70s. There's absolutely no requirement that even if you should procure the exact same guitar setup used by Tony Iommi, that you play Black Sabbath style riffs. There's no requirement, if you like the sounds of abstracted electronics and synthesizers, to use the sequencers and the programmers and the synths to emulate sounds that have occurred before. The music of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, was going back, were natural reflections and responses and developments and growths that were organically occurring in response to new technologies, new cultural movements, and new ideas in experimentation, and the results of those, and then confronting the limitations of technology that existed at the time. Um, and then so when we see this hallmark of late 20, I don't call it late 21st century, like um 20 years into the 21st century, to see basically the underground music scenes, which used to be where people would go to hear the new. The defining characteristic of underground music scenes, there can be no debate in 2020, are all retro nostalgia for times gone by, oftentimes for sounds that I can tell by looking at the general demographics that are available on Bandcamp, by looking at the general demographics of users on Spotify, looking at homemade videos that are made, these little music video productions that many of these individuals make, these artists. They're artists. I'm not debating, they're disputing the fact that people are engaged in creative activity. I'm not disputing that many of these practitioners have talent. But oftentimes I note that these people are emulating styles and cultures that they were never a part of. In 2020, an 18-year-old was born in 2002. You weren't there in the 80s. And I got to tell you, a lot of the sounds that these people that these children are choosing to emulate, I don't think they understand. Were like shit heel cultures. Like, were there a lot of like amazing synth pop bands? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But a lot of this synth pop of the 80s was garbage disposable music. And what I have many videos like this on my channel. If you find this Reemsey writes, "Oh dear, he is going to complain about music again." I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. I'm noting. It's a discussion that needs to happen. Thomas Minette with a donation of $2. Keep up the good work. Wait till you get to the halfway point of the video. God bless you, though. God bless you for your support. God us bless you for giving. You know what I mean? Jason Albert, I don't like this time slot. I'm working. I can't participate. Hey, Jason, what can you tell you? And there's other people that say when I go live on other time slots, they repeat that sentiment of yours, but for themselves. So yeah, it's not on the Eris. We hardly see you in the live chat on the Eris. It seems extremely sensational for a headline. Yeah, that's it. Because if there's anything that's clickbait in 2020, it's Vaporwave. Vaporwave's fucking over. If it was anything to begin with. Reemsey, oh dear, it's going to be tragic. Oh, it's it's insane. That's sensationalist. Nemotechnics says I was enjoying a classic Vaporwave album yesterday by Luxury Elite. Its complete empty disposability was part of what made it so distinctively enjoyable. Couldn't have happened in an earlier era. Well, see that actually, Nemotechnic, thank you, because you lead me into the central aspect of what is this video. This particular video that you're watching now or listening to now is supposed to be about. I've made these comments, whether you characterize them as complaints, as kvetches, or as reasonable, social commentary or musical commentary or analysis. The point of this particular video is to talk about something that I have talked about before, but it's specifically when people produce works that are supposed to confuse and confound people as to their actual point of origin, whether whether the artists behind them are doing this intently, or whether it's just that the technology allows them to do it too well. And this is nothing new. And this is the part of the problem with retro cultures, that retro culture is retro. I mean, go back to the 1980s and yep, good night, my friend. And look at a band like the B-52s. Look at the Stray Cats. Fuck, do you realize that Sha-Na-Na, the early 1950s rock and roll tribute band, played Woodstock? But when Sha-Na-Na played Woodstock, that retro sentimentality was an anomaly. They were the only ones doing that, right? And that's what they brought to the table, presumably. Bearing in mind that in 1968, Elvis's highlight was just 10 years in the past, right? The early days of rock and roll, when rock and roll first became a thing. Elvis's great years in 58 through, what was it? Elvis 62, whatever it was. That was just like a handful of years before Woodstock. But by the time you get to 10 years after Woodstock, 1978, I review many things of, many retro cultural artifacts, because my proclivities and interest in retro nostalgia culture and cultural evolutions. So I spend a lot of my time studying media, especially nowadays, from 1980, 1995, and 2000. So I come to the table with an informed opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like, this retro culture thing is something that I look at really, really intently. And you can tell that the predominance of retro sentimentality has markedly increased over the years. But even 1980, which is 40 years ago, there were interviews given by Pete Townsend, there were interviews given by Paul McCartney, and there were interviews given by Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. And in those interviews, they all commented on the fact that what they saw as interesting about 1980 was the amount of throwback and retro culture. People covering songs from 1964, songs being back in the hit parade that were covers of songs from 1958. And that's going back 40 years. These people noting that there seemed to have been a bit of a loop going on. And people know my famous theory is the 20-year nostalgia loop, that everything, keeps on coming back on this almost on the dot 20-year cycle, not just in music, culture, and art, but also in political stories and even sometimes historical world events. I'm not going to be, superstitious or woo woo or supernatural about it and act as though it's a glitch in the matrix. I'm just going to say that I think that it's something that is occurring and that can be noted, and we can contemplate why it's causing it. But I think we can also contemplate, what it means, and I think we can also potentially contemplate. We maybe should contemplate the potential harms. And one of the things that I think is happening now, which is, I think I can fairly use the term ironic. Back in the 80s, when groups like the B-52s aped kind of the early 60s or 50s kind of surfer weirdo, Gidget Goes Hawaiian culture, the technology was such that I don't think anyone would look at a rock video by the B-52s from, say, 1982 and say, or even listening to the music and say, oh, that looks like, not only does that look like it's from 1962, but that was from 1962, right? In the 80s and in the 90s, there were people that tried to make films that were, a pastiche or an homage to an earlier genre, even going so far as filming in black and white or what have you. You could see examples of this in specialty TV episodes of shows or certain films. But the technology was such that while they attempted to do this, it didn't quite work, But as technology develops, you see Woody Allen in the late 80s make a film called Zelig, where they made amazing technological revolutions in order to mock and put this central character Zelig in historical context in old films and such. This art was perfected by who was it? Was it Zemeckis, who did Forrest Gump in the mid 90s, where they're able to put him, with JFK and what have you. So the technology develops, but the technology at that level is still what the technology is available to Hollywood. But what happens inevitably with technology? It starts off as the expensive, privileged playground of the elite. right? Robert Zemeckis and Woody Allen and Woody Allen's producers and engineers, having to work tirelessly to create these illusions. And eventually the technology, comes down and down and down until it becomes available. And like I can tell you, like I've got apps on my phone. There's more than one that will take a modern YouTube video and doctor it up to make it look like it was VHS, right? Like it was a weathered VHS, and you can get very granular with the controls, right? How decrepit, how many copies of a copy, where, putting the retro style, perfect, time stamping in there, to where what's the point of this technology is to create something that looks like it was, from a different time. And now the technology has gone to that level, and the technology that we use as an example, talking about apps working on video, we know that the analog technologies exist in the sonic domain, that there's apps available on your phone or available to any kid playing with their computer to make music production, to make it sound like a digital audio file was actually sourced from vinyl or degraded cassette tape or reel to reel. And the level of sophistication of these algorithms and the sophistication of this computerized technology, these ones and zeros technology, is such that nowadays, unlike looking back to the B-52s, doing the 60s and the 80s, or certain bands, in the 90s, aping the 70s, the kids can, the people can. Alfie Solomon says, I just bought a Mellotron pedal that mimics the warble of an OG Mellotron. Yeah, the famous. I have that pedal. It's a great pedal, the Electro Harmonix Mel 9. It's a fantastic pedal. And I just got you Mel 9 Electro Harmonix pedal. It's a fantastic pedal. It's a fantastic pedal. And look, here's Omniero saying that Harry Styles does a good cover of Sledgehammer, but this is the crazy thing about it, right? So Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel, and Peter Gabriel's album that was on. So Peter Gabriel was constantly trying to emulate earlier sounds, like the song "Shock the Monkey" off one of the 3 self-titled Peter Gabriel records. That was his initial attempt at trying to create a Motown song. Now, given that Peter Gabriel is Peter Gabriel, his attempt to create a Motown song in 1982, 83 resulted in, Shock the Monkey, and then, Lord knows if maybe it would sound more like a traditional Motown tune to all of our ears, if he wasn't just as much under the influence of Carl Jung as he was, Barry Gordy. But it is what it is. Oh, Nemo Technic says Shock the Monkey was on Security. I apologize. I got that album wrong. And it's a great song. But by the time that Peter Gabriel gets to So, he's creating R&B. You know what I mean? And Sledgehammer was his second attempt to create a Motown song. And this time he doesn't fall abstractly left field and hit upon Shock the Monkey. No, he hits dead on. It's a song about doing it. I'm your sledgehammer. You know what I mean? And then you get the wonderful video, but the song in and of itself could have been a Motown track. We could imagine the Temptations singing Sledgehammer, right? We could certainly imagine like the Isley Brothers doing Sledgehammer. So by the time that you get there, and then later on you get Steam and those songs, and it's just traditional. So when we have Peter Gabriel doing Sledgehammer in 1987, say around there, he's involved in aping retro nostalgia from 20 years earlier, 1967, the tail end of Motown, the tail end of the original era of Motown. You're telling me that you see Harry Styles covering Sledgehammer. I'm assuming that's in 2000, sometime post 2010. So there it is, right on it. 40-year nostalgia loop of a nostalgia loop. And not to be all like French intellectual about it, but it was Baldier, had this notion of a copy of a copy of a copy of a Xerox of a Xerox. You lose things. You lose so many things along the way. Because the people, when Motown was Motown, and the creative artists around Motown, the singers, the songwriters, the artists, the producers, working in collaboration, they were creating. They weren't trying to make something that sounded like something else. They were acting out authenticity. We're producing an authentic product, the product being the Motown sound. When Peter Gabriel creates Shock the Monkey and Sledgehammer, he may create an authentic work. Well, I think Shock the Monkey, is a different thing than Sledgehammer. When we get to Sledgehammer, we realize, like someone also mentioned, Phil Collins. When Phil Collins, his love song for Tarzan is a different type of artistic work than Tonight or I Don't Care Anymore. Right? And I really want to make sure that the conversation doesn't just devolve. Doesn't just devolve into, critiques or this was good, this is bad. We're talking about the cultural movements, and we are talking about the act of aping versus the act of organic creation. And specifically in the attempt, it's one thing if you're inspired by Depeche Mode and you're a singer-songwriter and you're inspired by Depeche Mode, so your singer-songwriter tracks are laced with synths or electronic drum patterns. But it's another thing to obviously be producing a work that was written in the style of, and is not, what made Depeche Mode. I think people, and this is also the other thing I want to say to the kids, and this is going to be a critique. You're not Martin Gore, guy out there, doing this stuff today, gal out there doing this stuff today. You are not Nina Hagen. You are not Martin Gore. You're not. I mean, some of these people, it's just like, this is not good. This is not good stuff. If this stuff had come out contemporary to the stuff that was being produced in the 80s, your band would not have been signed because you suck. Just because you did your damnedest to make it sound like Just Can't Get Enough doesn't make it Just Can't Get Enough. Just Can't Get Enough is Just Can't Get Enough, and it fucking rocks. And your trash is sorry. It's sorry. It's the cafe I got drinking. I'll get a glass of water in a minute. It is what it is. I'm gonna check myself before I wreck myself. On the arrow says, "What flavor Kool-Aid is that, CW?" It's not. It's Mountain Dew Code Red. I had frozen a bottle of Poland Spring. I left the bottle of Poland Spring in the freezer, and it froze solid, and it's been melting over time. And I drank all the water out of it, leaving just this column of ice. And I thought to myself, ice in the office. I'm going to capitalize and pour my Mountain Dew Code Red over it to make it cool. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. Um, so Alfie Solomons writes, fine line between wearing your influences on your sleeve and aping, same as the fine line between clever and stupid. It's the fine line between clever and stupid. Alfie Solomons, who would consider making as much as it is possible original sounding or unique music currently. Um, it is what it is, and there'll be people that will say that I'm off the mark because I'm looking at the wrong artists. There will people that will say that I'm off the mark because I'm just being, I'm talking about, I'm just being, overly critical. But it is this thing. So we're maybe if I bring it and make it more personal, it'll make more sense. So because I'm studying the earlier, media of earlier cultures, I do concentrated searches for stuff. And more, especially in regards to the 80s, my attempts to find the material from a given date in, say, 1980 is there's noise. There's noise in the signal. And a lot of that noise is people, kids. I'm assuming they're fucking kids. Anyone, I'm 44. I'm 44. I'm going to be 45 at the end of August. So, a kid to me is anyone under 30. You know what I mean? So it's a wide margin. It's it's one thing to make something that you think that is your homage, or you think that the world of music ended in 1972 with Black Sabbath Sabotage, or whatever the actual year of that record was. You know what I mean? That was music. That's what music was awesome. So you're gonna spend, you and your fucking 20-year-old friends who are all smoking fucking dope and who are pretending to be Black Sabbath and pretending to be Pentagram and pretending to be Angel Witch, and you're fucking not. You know what I mean? It's pathetic, is what it is. You like the look, okay. You like the look, you like the sound, elements of the sound, okay. But when you try, these people, I see them walking around like they're trying to live in 1972, like that's going to make their fucking band awesome or whatever. And the entire audience is on dope, and everyone's on dope. And if you're on dope, you can listen to so much shitty music and think that it's okay. So there's people now that are titling their 8 hour lo-fi hip hop to study to style videos, retro playlists. They're labeling it like 1982. And then I'll listen to some of it and I'll be like, this shit's not from 1982. This shit's from 2018. This shit's from 2019. It's a fucking lie. And I can tell it's a lie because I can look at charts and I can remember artists from that given day, and I can know that Sister Sledge actually released a record in 1980, and I know that the Brothers Johnson's hit song "Stomp" was a hit in 1980, and I know what Dolly Parton released in 1980, and Kenny Rogers, and what Queen were doing in 1980. They had a hit, talk about retro, a hit with a song called "Crazy Little Thing Called Love." So I know what actually went down in 1980, 82, 83, 84, and I see this. And there's even a YouTube channel because it's called Retro FM something, and they'll be like Retro FM in 1982, and they have these music videos with soundtracks. It's synth wave, it's retro synth wave. I get it. You get high and you listen to the sounds of the 1980s, and that sounds like perfection, and it's doable, right? Creating something new and unique is hard, and doing something that is going to fit into a genre expectation and is going to automatically, by dearth of its hashtag, be able to get X number of views or X number of hits off of listeners on Spotify or on Bandcamp can be reassuring to your ego. But what the fuck are you going to tell your kids you did in 2020? Oh, I hung out and what's the point? Vangelis released a record in 1980. Cluster released Grosses Wasser, I think, in 1980. Jean-Michel Jarre released Equinox in 1978. These groups released this music. If people want to listen to retro 70s or 80s sounding synth works, the works of Giorgio Moroder are extant. They're available. There is no need to add to that canon because you can't add to that canon because that stuff was of a time. And I feel bad for the kids because there's a reason why they're creating this retro bullshit music. It's because it doesn't even occur to them what a new sound could be. Because they're in competition with the perennial everything now. Because everything's available 24 hours a day. And thanks to streaming services, everything that you could possibly listen to is at your fingertips. But where it gets stupid, really stupid, and kind of is when you mess with the historical record and title your new thing that you created in 2019 and you give it the label or you put the hashtag onto it 1982. I mean, if you're writing a song like when I researched 1995, there's a ton of songs called 1995. Why? It's because it's little kids talking about 1995 because I assume they were born in like 92 or whatever, and they're talking about their memories of like their fucking dad taking them to McDonald's for a Happy Meal before leaving the family or whatever. Or 1995 was the year they first like finger banged a chick or some stupid shit. But the stuff, and the other thing I wanted to say is this. Alfie Solomon says, theory, since all music is on YouTube and is streaming, people just mimic instead of creating unique sounds when you do not have access to hearing, seeing every band. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me is that at a time when it is so absolutely unnecessary. See, like back in the day, like in 1995, when everything wasn't available, there I guess there could be a justification to say like almost like a Black Sabbath tribute band. Like there's a justification to doing this stuff because it keeps the sound alive, it keeps the scene alive, it keeps that style of music alive. But in now when it's totally wholly irrelevant because anyone who listens to Black Sabbath can listen to Black Sabbath. And I guess it somehow gets to the point of where the people, the culture, the community identifies a sound as being, idolized, idealized and perfected. And like, so with stoner rock, it's Black Sabbath. Whatever you say, people stoner rock, from Caius to Sleep, both bands that I love, admire, and respect. Basically, I also know and understand that though I like and respect them and know that they brought their own sort of little thing to it, they're essentially Black Sabbath cover bands, right? Occasionally, toss in a kind of deep purplish riff for variety, right? But it was a rehash, and we're talking about bands that released their first couple of records in the early 90s. So, okay, so the sound is perfected. And I think what happens, and I think what really happened with stoner rock and like doom metal, right, was this notion that there were these archetypal, amazing records, Paranoid by Black Sabbath, one or two records by Candlemass, right? There were these amazing pieces of art, and that the fans of those works eventually got to a point where they had listened to those records, I think, so many times that, they just couldn't listen to, Sabotage one more time without blowing their brains out. And so eventually decided to kind of subconsciously or organically decided that we needed more of this. So they just, endorsed, a new era of bands to do it. But it's like Cathedral, like, it's like, You listen to some of these things and you're like, okay, you know, how far can they get away from that archetypal sound before they're doing something new or different and where it's still acceptable? And once you establish that they could divert from it, like, what is the, like, why can't you just like do something new? Like, you know what I mean? And it's so, a lot of these things are so narrowly confined. And the other thing that we need to know and understand is that it ends up turning essentially just into what I call genre music. And genre music is exactly what its name, means. It's like there's certain movies that end up, being horror movies because the content, because of the subject matter, because of the work that the director and the actors and the cinematographer are trying to do is dark, or is morose, or touches upon the supernatural, or investigates those darker planes, and essentially ends up fitting within the genre, fitting within that classification of horror. And much in the same way, there are amazing artists, sound artists, whose work, for want of a better term, just ends up being able to be under the genre of, say, noise or ambient. It's not that they're trying to make genre music, it's just that their work ends up being able to survive and thrive, or or be easily classified under that milieu or genre. But then there's genre music and genre film. And what is genre music and genre film? It's when people make a horror movie, right? It's when people make a black metal record. It is not an organic artistic outpouring. It is an intellectual project. We're going to form a power violence band. We're going to form a goth band. We're going to form a black metal band. And it can get, endlessly, diced up and nuanced. We're going to form a neoclassical, dark, dark ambient, inspired or inflected black metal band. But you're still just making a red velvet cake to order. You're following an instruction. You're following a pattern. You're following a playlist. And what I'm lately coming to terms with, and I think I did a bad job of keeping this video's discussion narrowly focused on the harm of what I think of, like, because people are creating stuff that it's like, it's not from 1982, so why label it as 1982? Even if you were inspired by the music of 1982, like, why then, have a video that's made to look like it was on VHS? Meanwhile, and back in the day on MTV, they didn't play videos that looked like they were made on VHS. The video quality and grain looks dated to us now, but at the time, that was cutting edge. They were using cutting edge technology and trying to create a professional product, not doing their best to make something that looked like it was amateur. And what's crazy is that now people are, I can tell, there's an example that I'm thinking of specifically. I didn't put the link in the description below, but this video today was almost put as, a specific critique or a specific analysis of a video and song that's available on YouTube by an artist called Sophie, Sofie. And you can tell that the videographer must have put untold hours attempting to make digital video that was shot in 2020 appear as though it was low grade video stock from 1987. And what ends up happening with all these pastiches is that it all becomes a melange. It all becomes inauthentic, because even though the band attempts to ape Black Sabbath 1972, um, it's recorded on digital tape, or the nature of the bass strings, the equipment that they're using, it's not what it purports to be. And a record that was made in 1972 that aged through time, that when you got it or when it made an impression on you in 1992, it wasn't, it naturally aged. The clicks and pops on an old record weren't put there by an algorithm. They weren't put there by an app or a plugin called Dustify or whatever, authenticate your sound. And when you use a filter to make something look like it was shot in 1972, you're not producing something that was shot in 1972 or even looks like it was made in 1972. Believe you me, brothers and sisters, it looks like something that was made in 2020, because the technology of 2020 is largely even defined. Look for photo apps on the Google Play Store or on the iTunes Store, and ask yourself, if it means something, how many of these things, have as a given feature retrofine filters, make it look like it came from an earlier time. You know what I mean? It's like the act of perfection has reached some sort of creative dead end, and the only thing that's capable of being done now is developing technology to make things look like they've been subject to various amounts of decay. And what does the decay mean? The decay means authentication, because these bands, these music artists, they know that they cannot be the retro artists of yesterday, because the world has changed. And maybe is it a return to an earlier time, as if collectively, if we all put our time, energy, and effort and mental energy into going back, and this, I know for many people who are fans of my channel know that the subject matter which I talk about and how I talk and have handled in the past, that may think that this is potentially even hypocritical. But to say that, to put this amount of energy into going or looking or acting like we're living 1982, it somehow does it. We'll somehow do it. We'll somehow reset the clock. So we will have 40 years from potential economic Armageddon, that we'll have 40 more years before potential true environmental disaster, that we'll have 34 years before we have to deal with the fact that that the United States really did elect a President Trump, that England really did elect a Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But even those things are retro moves. Boris Johnson, look at the 40-year nostalgia loop and ask yourself, how much does this guy actually just resemble the bizarre world of Margaret Thatcher? It's like England has decided, let's take a trip back in time and we can all visit not Disney World, we can revisit Margaret Thatcher's economic blight, economic apocalyptic landscape of the United Kingdom circa 1978 to 82. Alfie Solomons are like buying hats that have pre-worn tears or scuffs on them, or ripped jeans, right? And even those ripped jeans are a nostalgia loop. So what ends up happening is that, especially in regards to these like retro synth things, it's so completely pointless. You know what I mean? It's so completely pointless. And I want to say, I think what's getting to me lately is that, number one, it's completely unnecessary. You don't have to do it. There's no need to do it. There's so many kitschy, wacky movies from the 1960s that are available to people. You don't need to create a wacky 1960s style movie. You don't. You don't need to create a music setup that is like authentic to, this is all gear that was available to a bedroom producer in 1982. Okay. And even if you did get that, I do stuff like that all the time, put together retro setups. But when I do, you know what I try to do? I try and think to myself, how could I make music on this stuff that is like new? Right? Because we know in music that, you could have a retro music bedroom setup that would have been authentic for a techno producer circa 1987, 88, 89. Okay. You have the Atari ST, you got the TB303, you've got the real tape machine, you've got the Lindrum, whatever the fuck you have. You have the TR909, whatever the fuck you went out of your way to accumulate in an attempt to fucking buy. I know what you're doing. You're trying to buy audio authenticity. That if you somehow have the same equipment as person X, that your music was somehow going to automatically be of the quality of person X. And meanwhile, FYI, and in case you're curious, a lot of these like amazing acid house tracks from like 1989, 1990, if you release them today or played them on the dance floor at like Las Vegas or some EDM festival, no one would move to it because it's doubt. Let's be completely honest. A lot of this shit sounds like fucking bad dated electronic music from 1988. But it is what it is. And it was what it was. And it was organic and authentically an outgrowth of what was happening at the time and what people were doing and listening to and experiencing at the time. And when you do a retro kick, you are aping and emulating something. But it's not creativity. It's a different it's reproduction. Reproduction is an artistic skill. But it is what it is. And there are many artists, working artists, who can produce works that look like a Picasso, works that look like a fucking Da Vinci, that look like a Raphaelite painting, that look like a Goya, that look like a Francis Bacon. And that's a skill set. And utilizing that skill set, you will make product that will be serviceable and work for people who want a freaky Francis Bacon style painting for their wall while they fucking slap their wife. You know what I mean? With a safe word. But it is what it is. It's craftsmanship. But it is what it is. And it isn't what it isn't. And there's no need to create retro wave, retro synth wave, because retro keyboard sounds of the 70s are available and can be heard. And you can't say that you love it so much, you just need more of that, because there's no reason why you can't listen to, lionize, and promote the music of yesteryear while still making actual new sounds and exploring new things. And the end result is that people can't touch an authentic past, because if a kid in 2020 is looking and searching out for 80s sounds, I can tell you that they're just as likely to be served up some bedroom bullshit from 2018 as they are to be served up fucking fad gadget. And that's not acceptable to me. Because even as from the most dire case of a true child seeking to educate themselves about musical culture, that they shouldn't be hindered and they shouldn't be prevented from being able to get to authentic information. And it's especially bad in music, even because I see like there's like homebrew, video game programmers who program, even produce like new NES carts, like for the Nintendo Entertainment System, new games programmed in 2010, 2015 for the NES. And yeah, and it utilizes the technology of the NES. So it's an 8-bit machine. So you get 8-bit graphics, which have an inherently a kind of retro feel. But many of these pieces are not trying to act as though they're proud of the fact that this is new content for this machine from 2019. They're not trying to create a fake game from 1987. They're not trying to trick the audience into thinking, they're not purporting to the audience that this is a game from 1987. They may enjoy the notion that it could have been a game from 87, but it's different, to me at least. And I have no idea why it would even occur to someone to create a track or to create a video. And like this, the one thing I hate is this retro. This is a specific retro FM YouTube channel that does some shit where they say it's like retro hashtag retro 1984, and that it's not 1984. It's stuff that's made to look like 1984, but because these jabronis, because these fucking ignorant dope smoking kids weren't cognizant and moving around and aware in real time in 1984 because they're too fucking young to have been there. They think they're creating something from 1984, but I'm looking at the video and the white levels, the light flare, the fashion choices. This is from 1987. Here's something coming on the edge from 1978. It's all over the place, but it's labeled with a specific year. It's pointless, and I hate it. And I think it's childish and stupid. And I just want to say to these people, like, you will never be. You can do that all you want to. You will never be these artists that you emulate. So why live in another person's shadow? You know what I mean? And the other thing that's crazy is like a lot of this stuff, like the sound of it that's appealing to people, it's got nothing to do with the inherent, appealing nature of the sound. It's the sounds oftentimes aren't appealing. It's like vaporwave. They're sampling bullshit music from the mid 1990s and the mid 2000s. They're not sampling fucking Public Enemy. They're not sampling Fugazi. They're not even sampling Aphex Twin, right? Or Brian Eno. They're purposely trying to bring forth sounds that were throwaway. And at the beginning, Mnemotechnic had a great line about it, something about that this product, this song, this music couldn't have actually been produced by the 90s. And I think that's part of what I'm going for here is when vaporwave was like at its heyday, Mnemotechnic is sampling Weather Channel music, like Signal, Broken Signal, or that subgenre that I like. It wasn't sounds. It sampled sounds of the 90s, and in that kind of almost sounded like it was from the 90s, but you could tell that it was a new sound. The vaporwave, I started listening to it, and I liked it because it was kind of something new. But then when it devolved into retro wave and synth wave was when I said to myself, like, what are we doing here? We're not going forwards. And I think that part of what vaporwave hints at is that it might be the last hurrah of sampling, because to sample sounds of the early 90s is to maybe possibly sample the last sounds that weren't absolutely contained within the confines of retro nostalgia. Meaning that by the time you get to 2000, which is a retro repeat of 1980, a year that was already was already the beginning of retro repeat madness. Can you imagine sampling? I mean, if you sampled tracks from 2000, I mean, what's the sound of 2005? You can hear stuff and say, oh, that shit sounds like elevator music from the 1990s. You can't hear shit and say that sounds like elevator music of 2005. Right? There is no sound of 2005. Reemsey says, are we not men? You can sample Devo, right? But can you sample Christ? Can you sample, who is that group with can you sample the Yeah Yeah Yeahs? I mean, you could sample a memorable riff, but can you sample a sound, like a sound from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs or from fucking The Gossip? Both bands that I love and respect. Both bands that I love and respect. Sojourner says System of a Down, Linkin Park, 2005. Linkin Park were an absolute nadir. And if you look at the history of Linkin Park, they're more tied to the late 90s. And System of a Down was just the mainstream celebration of that abstracted kind of Primus and Mr. Bungle sound from the mid 90s. And and let's be honest, System of a Down have won one or two songs that are in any way, shape, or form memorable. And even if you sampled them, like, what is the difference between System of a Down or a Linkin Park sample from 2005? What would distinguish that from a Korn or Limp Bizkit sample from 1995? And that's the point. You see, if you sample something from 1985 and then juxtapose that against the sample from 1975, or a sample from 85 and a sample from 95, they will be sonically distinguishable. There was different things happening, but in post 2000, everything turns into a morass. Everything just turns into flatland. And just because I can't articulate it perfectly doesn't mean that it's not true. That's the best I could say. And at 58 minutes and 57 seconds, I'm going to let this meandering kind of come to an end, and I will look to the live chat. And again, let me just surmise and say this, a couple of things. Number one, all of the previously underground music, Spooky, Avenged Sevenfold has a breakout album in 2005, but it doesn't matter. Avenged Sevenfold's breakout record in 2005 does not have anywhere near the cultural impact of, Black Sabbath's Paranoid or AC/DC's Back in Black. No one talks about Avenged Sevenfold anymore. Rogue Faction says 50 Cent came on the scene around then. Yeah, no, and look, and there was stuff. Alfie Solomon says, ever seen the clip comparing Primus to the mumbling guy from King of the Hill over random bass notes? It's pretty spot on. Hey, look, at least they were doing something, right? And it is what it is. And it is what it is. And have I heard every type of music possible? Maybe, maybe not. Sojourner says, have we explored all there is to explore? That might be part of it. It might be the fact that I think it has something to do, it does have something to do with the transmission technology of the internet, the fact that the bar to entry into creating music and to promoting music is, you know, de minimis. And it also has to do with the fact that everything being available 24 hours a day. Like, when I was a kid, you couldn't get every record you wanted to hear. It was impossible. Number one, you couldn't find some of these records you read about in a magazine. You couldn't find the tape. You couldn't find the record. It just wasn't available. But now that everything is available, there's something there, and I think also has to do with, I think it has something to do with some sort of psychological sense of being able to return to a different time, that there's something inherently scary about 2020 or to the 2000s that makes people want to be able to repeat or travel back in time to different periods. And it might also be just this notion that I've put forward before, that the music genres that, rock based idioms, electronic based idioms, hip hop based idioms, that these cultures have now existed to the point where it's like there was a time when jazz was the cutting edge music of the now, and then there was a point in time where jazz was an academic music like classical music, with people getting PhDs in jazz history, people getting PhDs in jazz performance and jazz trumpet, and when you get to that point, you have to know and understand that culturally things have changed, and jazz in 2020 can never be jazz in 1920. It's a different field. It's a different world, and and it just is what it is. 1995 was 20 years after the release of the first groundbreaking Ramones record, right? 2015 was 2015, 5 years ago from where we are today, was the 40th anniversary of the release of that Ramones record. And believe you me, there were people that were getting together in bands and aping the Ramones in 1985, right? And then there were bands aping them in 1995, often to great financial success. But now, listen, just like we talked about jazz music, believe you me, there's someone somewhere doing a PhD dissertation on the first Ramones record, right? The cultural and sociological impact of the Ramones in 2020, full of, intellectual, academic platitudes, you know what I mean? Cross-referenced, interviews and timestamps, all that good old-fashioned academic bullshit. And what? Like 5 of the 5 original Ramones are dead? 4 of the 4 original Ramones are dead, right? Johnny's dead, Joey's dead, Dee Dee's dead. And who was the drummer? Marky was the first drummer. The first drummer is dead too. Nemotechnic says academic presses have published books on the 80s industrial scene. Absolutely, and that's where it all comes down to. Meanwhile, those guys and gals couldn't afford lunch and then someone's going to make a sizable income being a tenured professor writing about them. And what's going to happen to those academic books? Because I have many of them, like Assimilate. I have them. They get purchased by guys that grew up listening to industrial music that want to listen to it, that want to reminisce. Alfie Solomon says, "What was the last album that blew your mind, or one that you found listening to over and over, even if it was years ago?" Lisa Kane says, "Music major here. Nothing unique since the Gregorian chant." There you go. Perfect. Spooky writes, Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here was 1975. Yeah, incredible, right? So in 1975, you've got Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, the first record by the Ramones, and many other things. And what do we have in 2015 and 2020? Fuck you. I tell people all the time, like, it's rock music idioms, techno music. It's all, be honest. It's all, we're pretending to produce new music. We're pretending to produce new music in a vain attempt to make it that life hasn't fundamentally changed in 2020 from when it was in 1975. And I just want to say, and and the reason I just want to always bring this back home for me and for you, to say that we can talk about these things in this way because we're talking about popular music. In other words, we're not talking about kids starving in Africa. We're not talking about ignoring the AIDS crisis. We're not talking about turning a blind eye or engaging in climate science denial, right? I do not have to respect I do not have to treat with a respectful tone, or creative kindness, the George Clinton. You know what I mean? Fuck that guy. Fuck Pat Shannington. Fuck the needle drop guy. Fuck all those motherfuckers. Fuck them. Fuck them in the ass. Fuck them. Fuck them. Fuck Tyler, the creator, that fucking bullshit artist. It's a fucking bullshit artist. I don't care what. It's just people have made, and it's because the audience is all. I'm telling you. I blame it all on marijuana. Because of marijuana, people have become accustomed to accepting listening to bad music. A guy mumbles round like something like this over beats. Say what? I can't afford 7-Eleven, and I come back you, and you don't want to know about me. Wow, it's yet another potential voice of our generation, right? It's just, you know what I mean? It's the fact that in a time and an age when the digital music technology available to the average child, with a laptop computer or even an iPhone, makes the production of near perfect and digitally crisp beats an afterthought. Finally, someone comes out who's brave enough to record a record that in 2020 that sounds like outsider art or the documentation of a nervous breakdown in a small New England silo in 1982. And then you interview that person, and they're not having a mental breakdown. It's, you know what I mean? It's like that they could. And I skipped over Alfie Solomon's, question. You know what's crazy? Here's what I'll tell you: songs that, geez, if that even counts. There you go. So look, what was the last album that I heard for the first time that I listened to over and over again, or just blew me away? I don't know if I could provide an accurate response to that question, Alfie. But I can tell you this: the last, I didn't hear, the first time I ever heard "Forever Changes" by Love was during my first year in law school in 2002. Right? I think if I were to make your question more germane to the subject we're discussing, might be to say, what was what's the last band that CW Chanter took into his heart, kind of really respecting and loving their output. And this is telling for me. One of the last bands that ever came out that I'll still like try to go out of my way to hear, new stuff that they're doing, was a band. I think they're out of Detroit called the Electric Six, and they're totally retro. I mean, why do I like them? It's because like 70% to 80% of the average great Electric Six song sounds like either Kiss or the Cars, but they do it well. You know what I mean? I like them, but if that's exactly my point. You know what I mean? Like what new stuff is coming out that really blows my mind? I mean, Floral Shop by Macintosh Plus, I thought was a great record, and I played it a couple of times. But I don't think I can't conceive, I could be wrong, but I can't conceive of people returning to Floral Shop like they did Forever Changes by Love, or Rubber Soul by the Beatles, or even Oxygen by Jean Michael Gerard, um, or Stratosphere by Tangerine Dream. Um, I think the reason people liked Macintosh Plus is number one, it's that number one lead track, which is just it's the look. I mean, if you sample good music, you create good music, right? If I sample a bomb ass Donna Summer riff or vocal refrain, it's gonna work, right? The Nemotechnic says behind the big hit, Floral Shop isn't so compelling. Yeah, and everybody remembers that one song. And it's an okay record, but remember, the artist behind that record released a new album, 17 minute album in 2019 that I pointed out sounded exactly like Autekra, Autechre circa 1999. It's all what they used to call glitch hop, or cuts and clicks music. And that was it was totally retro, late 90s. And no one talks about that record at all. It dropped. Anthony Infantano from the Needle Drop reviewed it, and that's all you ever heard of that fucking record. And the dirty little secret why a lot of people like these genre musics? I'm going to tell you. Because they know they can do it. Right? Power violence, black metal, vaporwave, future funk, um, underground lo-fi hip hop. Part of the reason that a lot of people gravitate towards these things is because they're reproducible and because you could do them. If Macintosh Plus's Floral Shop can be authenticated as a artistic achievement, then electronic musicians who are familiar with the technology of sampling, who are familiar with the technology of working in a DAW, digital audio workstation, can hear that and can say, me too. And in a world where the difference between potential producers and potential content creators and the audience is almost nil, because we are all potential content creators, we are all potential, stars. Everyone plays the game. And I play the game too. People have here listen to me can know that I do drone music. And it's just I'm not creating, I'm not reinventing any wheels. FR Dispatch Gaming says mini desk music. I just like that title, whatever it is. Let me do this. Let me turn to the live chat. We're at 1 hour 14 minutes. Let me spend a little bit of time with you, or maybe I already have spent time with you. Alfie Solomon, stop. We get it. I hear you. Right. And first of all, Alfie Solomon's by responding to my Electric Six reference with quoting Danger, what's the name of that fucking track? High Voltage or whatever it is. Danger, Danger is showing. It's like, is like proving that you're the world's biggest Buddy Holly fan by mentioning Peggy Sue. Right? Let's get deep. Let's talk about Dark Angel. Be My Dark Angel. Let's talk about Broken Machine. Fuck around with me, kid. Anyway. Spooky puts in the black pill. It is, but you know what? It's not a black pill, because the black pilling is like, give up. It's done. It's over. What I'm trying to do here is to remind people that you do not need to do this. If you have the technology to produce vaporwave, or the technology to produce so-called hashtag retrosynth, if you've got the technology to produce stoner rock or doom metal or black metal or power violence or goth or neo post-punk, whatever, you have the technology available to create something fucking new. What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you that craven? Do you not believe in yourself that much that you can't conceive of getting an audience, creating the sound? And the other thing is, the audience is fucking cowardly as fuck, and they'll settle for fucking anything. And they also want to pretend that they were cool enough to be there back in the day, right? Because the old has the air of authenticity, which is what everybody craves like a drug, because it's so lacking in today's society. Reamsey writes, you should listen to Charlie Puth, CW. He is very wonderful and plays all the instruments on his record, and he sings beautiful songs that he writes himself. Fantastic. I'll give him a shot. Nemo Technica, okay. Nemo Technica says, that's spooky. I first discussed Gil Scott-Heron during his Bill Laswell material phase. I just discovered the bottle. Alfie Solomons, if you like stoner rock or rockabilly or whatever, you enjoy playing it, so you play it. Doesn't always have to reinvent the wheel. Blues is fun to play too. Yeah, that's fine. I get it. And I think if that was like the only if that was going on organically. So for example, like go back to we talked about the Stray Cats in the 1980s or the B-52s in the 1980s. We talk about like rockabilly-esque bands from the late 1990s, or the Brian Setzer Orchestra, or the reviving of swing culture, right? If that's going on amongst the panoply of other activities or musical creations, it's one thing. But when we get to 2020 and the only option is retro kitsch, then there's a problem. And also, your point about the rockabilly is disputable, and I'll tell you why. It's not that I have an issue with people playing rockabilly. That's not the issue. The issue is not whether or not guitar, bass, and drums played in traditional 12-bar blues formats can be enjoyable or enjoyable to play. That's fine. Also, it's because the person playing the fucking rockabilly bullshit is playing a Gretsch guitar just like the 1950s, and his girlfriend is hanging out in stiletto heels with Betty Page bangs and fishnet stockings, just like the 1950s. And she's standing right next to her girlfriend, who works as a internet pinup model, dressed like fucking a pornographic version of Rosie the Riveter, just like the 1950s. And the fucking drummer's famous because he's got a fucking DA haircut that goes out 3 feet, just like the fucking 1950s. And they're all wearing black leather jackets, just like the 1950s. And they're playing in a, in a bar with guys with, tattoos, just and suspenders and white beater t-shirts, just like the 1950s. It's the whole fucking accoutrement and bullshit. Just because you like rockabilly music doesn't need to play that in 2020 you can't put a new fucking swing on it. But they don't put a new swing on it. Or the swing is some sort of fucking image thing. It's like they're a retro 1950s rockabilly band, but they dress like vampires, or like, the lead singer is a female who dresses like kind of like a vampy, like what if like Marlena Dietrich got bit by fucking Lestat from the Anne Rice novels, and but the band all dress up like werewolves, and their signature song "Howling at the Fucking Moon." Fuck you. Get a fucking life and get a fucking job. Why are you dressing? You think you can go back to the 1950s? FYI, the 1950s fucking were garbage. You know what I mean? It's fucking this fucking bullshit. Who's a huge fucking Depeche Mode fan? Fucking what's his face? The fucking racist. The American one, not Tommy Robinson. The guy I'm thinking of. Alfie Solomon's in art school. It's the same. The kids all dress the part, wear the uniform, and you can make art and not be an eccentric character. You can be a normal person. Absolutely. And Alfie Solomon says, I was just picking genres, not calling out rockabilly. Pick any style any person like to play. But yeah, the whole greaser get up and uniform. It's all fucking uniforms because it's all genre music. It's an attempt to reproduce a culture, to create culture. And it does not work that way. Richard Spencer, you're not from Tom Tremaine says Morrissey. Yeah, absolutely perfect example. There you go. You're not from sorry. Wouldn't it have been awesome if you got to live in England in 1982 when the first Smiths record came out, or you got to see The Cure on their Play the Forest live in 1980? Wouldn't that have been fucking boss? Yeah, but it didn't fucking happen for you. You were born in like 2000 and you were born in like 1999. Deal with it. Alfie Solomon's punk rock as a uniform. Be different like us. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-tootly. And there's no need for it. The retro music of yesteryear is available for your purview, for your edification, from your learning, and for your enjoyment. And then when it comes to today, make something fucking new. But they don't make anything fucking new because they can't fucking do it. They can't do it. Spooky says, my parents saw Marillion while I was in the womb, right? That's why they named you fucking Kaylee, right? Meanwhile, whatever happened to Fish? That's something for that's one for the Marillion fans. That's one for the Marillion fans. Hey, Marillion fans, whatever happened to Fish? Reemsey says, I think it's very nice that young people are interested in older music. Well, you might have a motivation there, right, Reemsey? I'm not going to go into it, but you go. Hey, listen, you know what I mean? You're young at heart. Fantastic. But it's one thing to be inspired by it. It's one thing to be part of a tradition, but it's another thing to keep that tradition of experimentation going into new fucking ways and new fucking places. Right? It's the emulation that I can't stand. It's the reproduction when there's no need for reproduction that I can't stand. But then this turns into a rant, and then it turns into repetition. Alfie Solomon says, Built to Spill is the anti-rock band. Just a bunch of normal-looking dudes rocking out. The no look is a good look. It markets well. It markets horribly. That's why Built to Spill is Built to Spill. And then Built to Spill have one fucking record that came out. Their huge record came out in 1995 too. Anyway, but you know what? And it might sound like, and at the end of the day, it might just come off as critiques. It might just come off as criticism. It might just come off as kvetches. I put the hashtags in. We'll see if any of the kids, if any of the younger generation, hang out and listen to the end. It's just a simple reminder. If you like this, if you like these sounds, why not do something new with it? And dirty little secret time is that, you know what? People want to know what they get. They want to maximize their entertainment dollar. So they just keep on going. Lee Westlake says, if your dad likes the music you're making, you're probably taking a wrong turn somewhere. There you go. There you go. Reemsey says, are you going to buy the new Jefferson Starship album, Mother of the Sun, releasing on August 21st? That's the day before my birthday. I'll definitely listen to it. I'll definitely give it a spin. I'd be interested to see what's going on. But remember, Reemsey, this is what's kooky. In 1995, Jefferson started. What year was it? I think it was 1995, around there. There was a Jefferson Airplane reunion, or maybe it might have been earlier. It might have been like 1990. It might have been 1989, which has got me into that 1969-89 nostalgia loop. And then also the success, the growth, and the explosion in the Grateful Dead's popularity in 1988-89, culminating 20 years on the 20-year nostalgia loop of their early days from 1968-69. The 20-year nostalgia loop is real, but when we get to 1980 and when we get to 2000, we're re-looping to 1980, which in and of itself was a retro rehash. That's when cultural creation and creativity stops, and it all just becomes replication and repetition. Castor Vaughn writes, being a musician that makes a living in music, which took about 15 years, the young musicians I see are mediocre at best, sorry to say, but I rarely see someone who leaves an impression. Rimsey, I think Jefferson Airplane reunion was 1989. They released an album and did a tour, right? 20 years after 1969. The joke writes itself. Spooky. I grew up on Cliff Richard, the Wurzels, S Club 7, Ricky Martin, Roger Bannister. Found metal and rock at 11. That's when we find metal and rock at 11. But you know what? Spooky. You're my hooker and my hoe, and I will always have this over you. I turned 11 and discovered rock and metal when 11 years old was 1986. Okay. So when I discovered metal, I was getting into bands like the first few Slayer records, first couple of Metallica records. Megadeth were going concern. They weren't in repetition mode. You know what I mean? Peace Cells and Who's Buying had just come out. You know what I mean? Kiss My Ass. What was the bands that you got to discover? Avenged Sevenfold, Son, Daughter, Lover, Friend, Kiss My Ass, Lamb of God. Lamb of God fucking suck. I'll be solid. Doesn't all music that is successful all kind of stick to a formula? The repetition of the pop song structure, verse, chorus, verse. The verse is a hook, the chorus is a hook, the bridge is a hook. Yeah, we can get there. I mean, that has to do with popular music. But then again, we live in a day and age where there's people that they're retro aping Captain Beefheart, right? They're retro aping the bizarre artistic juxtapositions of Mr. Bungle. Spooky. When I put out a shout out when I first started covering this New Music Sucks, a hashtag known new music stuff. Spooky, it's right on cue. It says Spooky says, I love Enter Shikari. So I said, there's no new modern music. Modern music sucks. Everything's a repetition. There's nothing new or original. Spooky reached out to me and she said, check out this group, Enter Shikari. Okay. I think that they're creative. I think they're unique and they're new. And I listened to them. I listened to like one or two. I listened to like 2 records and I wrote back to Spooky and I said, listen to me. Okay. Number 1, send nudes. Number 2, Enter Shikari are a 20-year loop nostalgia ripoff of a little band called Mr. Bungle. This part, then this part, this part, then this part. Yeah, all that fucking bullshit. Fuck y'all motherfuckers with the Enter Shikari bullshit. Fuck those motherfuckers. You know what I mean? And now what I'm being told, because I pay attention to all sorts of bullshit, like there's a guy on YouTube called the Punk Rock MBA. An MBA is a master's in business, in case FYI, in case you're curious. Right? God bless him. God bless him. Punk Rock MBA. Love his stuff, high production values, interesting stuff. And he's talking about the revival of nu metal in 2020, the revival of nu metal, at which point the guy that loves the 20-year nostalgia loop points out, you mean the revival of nu metal in 2020, 20 years past 2000? Gee, didn't see that one coming. And nu metal fucking sucked. And if you can tell me that people can really make a distinction between nu metal and like emo core or mallcore, it's just the creation of endless labels. This is going to go off into another tangent. I'm not going to do it at this thing. We've talked about this before. The endlessly new labels for every little minor modification in the sound becomes worthy of a new label, right? You can really see the evolution in who is that band with the Stickly bullshit? The fucking crabcore stuff. What was that fucking bullshit band? You know what I mean? They're like, it's not new. Like, what's the really the difference between metalcore and nu metal? Reemsey says, listen to Ghost. You must listen to Ghost, then you would be happy. I do listen to Ghost. I listen to the actually authentic band called Ghost, who are from Japan. Was it Lami Rabi Sabi or whatever the name of the record was? I ain't listening to that fucking Ghost, that black metal, that Slipknot if they take off the masks and put on vampire makeup band. I don't like Ghost. I've heard Ghost. I don't like them at all. You know what I mean? Spooky says, I can't think of the band, but I know what you mean. Yeah. You know what I mean? Nemotechnic says slush wave is a recent thing. Yo, Nemotechnic, you have the same disease that I do. Because we got old, right? We think of things like things that happened 5 years ago as being recently, but it's not. Slushcore goes back to, who is the guy? Who's that fucking, it was one of those vaporwave bands with a Japanese name, even though they're not Japanese. Mario Heat, Children of Bodom. Well, the Children of Bodom is a different thing because that's just retro wave. That's just retro metal. Reemsey says you actually love Ghost. You just don't understand that you love them. Well, because you said it, Reemsey, I'll concede the point. Nemotechnic says slush wave or slush core. Yeah, endless variations on the theme. This guy uses 50% less samples, and he put in an 80s sample instead of a 90s sample. That's why I think we can distinguish it from just like calling it vaporwave, or the kids hanging out saying, I'm really listening to a lot of like basically like lo-fi, like slush wave and like ocean grunge now. Like the fuck you. You know what I mean? Fuck, these are not genre distinctions. We didn't listen to Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, and Wishbone Ash or Blue Oyster Cult and give them all different genre names. We all called them hard rock and heavy metal. That's it. If hard rock and heavy metal can encompass Van Halen and Metallica, right? Then vaporwave, just vaporwave, can encompass all this fucking childish slushcore bullshit, right? Honestly, no reason to give it a new genre title, but giving it a new genre title gives people the opportunity to flex their weaponized autism, their endless collection habit, endless cataloging and collection of things, as if to create and people are playing the game of music production, music reproduction. If you put it up on Bandcamp, and I don't care if you made 50 copies of a cassette, you are not engaged in making in cassette culture like bands back in the day who released records on cassette were. You are creating the physical output, number one, in order to create product that you can sell and hopefully make some sort of money, or to play this game. It's like kids getting together and playing house, or kids getting together and playing newspaper, right? I'm the editor, I'm the journalist, I'm the photographer. No, you're not. Your kid's playing the game, and that's beautiful. But these vaporwave bands on fucking Bandcamp, if you put it up on Bandcamp, it's released on Bandcamp, and people download it and shit, and it doesn't have a physical output that the majority of people are listening to it as a physical copy. It's not a fucking record. You're not releasing records. No one will remember you. You are not Depeche Mode. You are not Devo. You are not fucking Brian Eno. You're fucking not Aphex Twin. You're living and dying in 2020. They love you this year. They'll forget you next year. You don't exist. And when people forget, it's all up in the cloud. Download failures happen all the time, and databases are lost all the time. And I gotta go. Because I've been drinking Mountain Dew, and then it will start turning into like, and kids today, what's the matter with these kids today? And the fucking haircuts. And here's another thing, boyo, pull up your pants. Who's calling me? Law office. Yes. Not bad, Sean. How are you? No, thank you. Yeah, just take me off the call list. Thank you. God bless you. There you go. So there you go, folks. Mario Heat, CW low key listens to Cradle of Filth. The first Cradle of Filth record was great. I'd stopped listening to Cradle of Filth after, what was it? Cruelty and the Beast or something. I can't remember the name of the record. But remember, everyone thought that Cradle of Filth would be huge. They're not. Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, they lasted and the weathered the test of time to become Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, who lasted. It's like Madonna and what's her face, Lady Gaga. Groups used to have careers that lasted 40 years. And then the generation after them had careers that lasted 30 years. And then a generation later, the groups would have 20-year careers. And then they had 10-year careers. And now no one has a month-long career. Spooky says, don't forget AC/DC. I'll name and check AC/DC. Mnemotechnic says, Scanner made experimental music out of recorded phone calls. Absolutely. With his proverbial scanner. I saw Robin Rimbaud live 2 to 3 times between 1995 and 97. And now he just plays with a modular synthesizer. God bless him. I follow him on Twitter. Truth Seekers, I am late. What did I miss? Everything, because the live stream is about to end. Folks, that was my live stream for tonight, July 29th, 2020. Another episode of my Modern Music Sucks and It's Total Rubbish. And hey, kids, stop labeling your shit as being from 1982 to 1984 if it wasn't actually from 1982 to 84. If the record is from 1982, it should have a demarcation on it indicating online that it's from 1982 because that is data that is potentially accurate. If you recorded your bullshit retro synth wannabe 1980 shit in 2019 or 2020, please do the world a favor and don't mislabel it as being from 1984 or 1987. FYI, in case you're curious, here's another one. If you've got the technology capable of making your uploaded videos not look like they came out in inferior technology from 20 or 30 years ago, Go ahead and make modern videos that don't look like they were made 20 or 30 years ago. Spooky said, writes, 2005 was low key a good year. I'll prove it, damn you. Con, you will never prove anything. The only thing, keep on playing my game, Spooky. You know what I mean? You're like on the periphery of my web. Keep on struggling. No, you'll break free of my chains and my web sooner, right, or later, right? Keep on fighting. Give it your all. Expend all your energy in trying to fight this, and then you'll accept, and you'll just, and I'll say, you grew up in a time with nothing and nobody, and nothing is real. Deal with it. And you'll be all like, well, I'll be like, it's okay. Because we could just jump in my time machine and go back 20 years ago. I love you. I love you. Tom Tremaine says, so long as you don't ban me again. People get banned for all sorts of reasons. I don't think it really has anything to do with me. Spooky says, the harder I fight you, the harder the fight, the harder you squeeze. And or the variation would be, we talked about Morrissey before, was this, the more you ignore me, the closer I get. There you go. Reemsey, Tom Tremaine, I don't care if you care, because I think you are a wicked devil worshiper. Yikes. Tom Tremaine loves to start troubles and fights. I have no idea what's going on with Tom Tremaine, but God bless you. FRX Dispatch Gaming says, can you do another music cast soon? I absolutely can. My shit is as retro as anything else, but I don't try to act as though it came out in 1980 or 1969. I admit that it was made today. Mario Heat, CW, what's the last concert you attended? What was the last concert I attended? The last year for me, big year for me in concerts, might have been 2018. I know, like, around that time, I saw. Let me get the ticket. Oh, I know. I saw 9 Inch Nails in 2013. After that, I saw Garbage. It might have been this. The last thing that was like a concert. I saw Garbage open up for Blondie. And that had to have been like 2017, something like that. Obviously with COVID-19, I haven't gone out a lot. Oh shit. Fuck me. You know who I saw? Are you guys familiar with, I think they're called KLT? And it's Peter Reberg from Mego Editions fame on synthesizers, and it's his band was Stephen O'Malley. I saw them, and I think they're called KTL. I think it's supposed to be pronounced Cult. I don't know. And who opened up for them was a side project of Blind Idiot God. I think they're called Azonic. That was a great show. Oh, and they had another guy that opened up too, whose name I can't remember. An African American gentleman, power electronics guy. That was great. That was a good show. I must have seen that show in like 2019. That was probably like February or March of 2019. That was probably the last gig I went to, because then obviously my life hit kind of this crazy transformation shitstorm, and then there was COVID-19, and I have no real desire, like live music. I'm like, Spooky says, for me, it was like 2016. I got bad anxiety and had to stop going to shows. That happens. Oh, God. Spooky says, I saw Foo Fighters in Hyde Park in 2006. 85,000 people. They had members of Queen, Motorhead played. I loathe Dave Grohl. I loathe Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters. I think the Foo Fighters are just like, when I hear the Foo Fighters, I want to barf. Post nine says I saw Swans around 3 years back. Too old for that shit. Both you, both me, and both um whatchamacallit? What's his name? Michael Gira. They're all too old. They're all too old. Anyway, now I said we're gonna chug out at an hour and a half, and it's 1 hour and 45 minutes. That's enough of a show. I gotta hit the road eventually. So I will hit the road eventually. Meaning now. I love you. I love you. I love you. If no one told you they loved you today, somebody just did. That's somebody CW Chanter. And make of that what you will. And I will catch you on the next live stream, which will probably be tomorrow sometime. Probably. Okay. Genocide says, I just got here. That's how it happens sometimes. But then again, all you need do is rewind and start from the beginning. Ain't nothing stopping you from doing that. Okay? And until next time, I'll talk to you. I'll see you around.